trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. I really had no idea, and I was really nervous and really scared. And I was just praying about it, and the word that just I kept thinking about is the word grace. And we sing about the word grace, we read it in the Bible a lot, and I just think it's a really important word to the Christian faith in general. So I have 3 things that I want to cover talking tonight. The first is, what is grace? The second is, how does God show us grace? And the third is, why is grace so important? Okay, so first off, just general definition, grace is extending kindness to someone who doesn't deserve it. And another word that kind of goes along with grace is mercy, which is another really important word for us as Christians, our salvation. And mercy is withholding of punishment that is deserved. So keeping those 2 definitions in mind, I'm going to share a little story. So, a couple weeks ago, I woke up at 5:30 in the morning on a school day. I had procrastinated my American Studies project to the morning of, like I always do. And I had to write a paper paragraph or something about the 60s. I was like, okay, I'm going to get this done. I worked on it for 2 hours. And so I worked on it, put it aside, got ready for school, then drove on over to Plano, and I had my car parked in the parking lot, and then I opened my backpack, and it wasn't in there. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I woke up this morning, worked on this thing for 2 hours, and then this is my first period class, and if I don't have it, I'm like, this is not good. So I was really mad, put my car into drive, and just zoom out of the parking lot, the big lot, and completely forgetting the fact that that street is a school zone. And I was going 40 miles per hour. And then, before you know it, I see the blue and red lights go on behind me, this police siren, slam on my brakes. I was like, no, please no. And yeah, it was obviously for me. So I pull into the nearest parking lot, and I was like, I know I was going over the speed limit, but come on, he's gonna let me go, even though I knew I deserved it. He didn't let me go. I had to go to court, got a ticket, $349. So that's how that went down. But I want to have a little hypothetical situation here, using what happened to me. Let's say that, so after receiving my ticket, I go to court, and let's say that I go up to the person at the window, and I show them my ticket, and let's say the person at the window just goes, you know what, you were going 20 miles per hour over the speed limit in a school zone, you totally deserve to pay a $349 fine, but you don't have to pay it. It's canceled, not on your record anymore, you don't have to pay it. That is an example of grace. That is an example of mercy. That was punishment being withheld from me, if that were to have happened, because I completely deserved to get that ticket, and if the lady were to just have said, you know what, you don't have to pay it. That is mercy. That is withholding punishment that I totally deserved. But then, let's say on top of that, this lady was like, you know what, I'm feeling really generous today, and just decided to hand me the keys to a brand new car. That would be grace. I did nothing but show up at court because I deserved the punishment, and this person just decided to give me a new car. That's grace. That is extending kindness to someone who obviously didn't deserve it. So yeah, that is just a little illustration of what grace is and what mercy is. Those 2 things are very important. And now I'm going to talk about how God shows us grace and how he shows us mercy. So, I guess I'll go ahead and read Ephesians 2:8-9. This is the verse that I kind of wanted to base my lesson off of. And it says, God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. So yeah, that's saying that we are saved by God's grace. So I'm just going to go back and talk about why it's so important that we're saved by grace. So does someone else want to look up Romans 3:23?
Oh, you got it?
I'll read it.
Dang it, Hava.
Romans 3:23.
Yes.
Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
Okay, yeah, so that's a pretty simple verse. Everyone has sinned and we fall short of God's glory, and that's why we're separated from God. Ever since the beginning of humanity in Genesis, the Bible tells us that when Adam and Eve commit that very first initial sin of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that sin enters the world, and sin has been a curse on all of humanity ever since then. So every human has sinned, and that instantly separates us from God, because God is holy, God is perfect, and when we sin, God cannot be around sin because He's holy. So we have all sinned, we're all separated from God. And the reason that grace is so important is because that's the only way that we could ever mend the gap that sin created between us and God. I don't think anyone needs to look this up, but John 3:16, for God to love the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And that, for God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son. That is the gift of grace that allows us to be reconciled with God. So our sin no longer separates us. Jesus is God's gift of grace. So I'm just going to go ahead, after having said those things, going to read Ephesians 2:8 and 9 again. God saved you by His grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. So Jesus was God's gift to us when we were sinners, when we were completely undeserving. That's just like what I just said. Grace is extending kindness to someone who doesn't deserve it. And it's really important to understand in this Christian faith that we can do, we have done absolutely nothing to earn God's grace. And I think that can be really hard for a lot of us, and it's really hard for me to grasp. Because of the society we live in, everything is merit-based. If you work really hard in school and you study all the time, you'll get good grades. If you go to the gym, you work out a lot, you'll see the results. Or if you practice a sport a lot, you'll get really good at it. We're used to, when we do good things, we get good things. And even in other religions, I looked up some of this stuff, like the 5 pillars of Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. All of those religions are merit-based religions. You have to do certain things in order to achieve this spiritual reconciliation. So, like for example, Islam, the 5 pillars of Islam, I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but you have to go to Mecca and Medina, the pilgrimages, and and there's other things you have to do to be saved. And then the same thing for Buddhism and Hinduism. If you do enough good deeds, then you'll reincarnate, and as you keep doing good deeds, you get higher and higher up. So you go from snail to cow, and that's how it works. And it's all based. What they believe is all based off of what humans do and the good deeds that humans perform. But in the Christian faith, being good doesn't earn salvation. Doesn't earn salvation at all. So I'm going to hit on the third point right now. Why is grace so important? It's so important because when you realize what we deserve and then what God has withheld from us and what He's given to us, does someone want to look up Romans 6:23?
Half a.
I can do it.
Dang it, half a. Jump on that opportunity.
Hold the Bible open.
It's okay. You can just say I got it, and then you can look it up.
I got the numbers.
Okay. I'll tell you later. Yeah, just these.
Okay, Romans 6:23. For the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Okay, so the first half of that verse and the second half of that verse both talk about different things, but they're both super important. So the wages of sin is death. What we have earned is death. Okay, can someone else look up, actually I have it right here. Ephesians 2:4-5 says, "But God is so rich in mercy, and He loved us so much, that even though we were dead because of our sins, He gave us life when He raised Christ from the dead. It is only by God's grace that you have been saved." So going back to Romans 6:23, the wages, or what we have earned because of our sin, is death. We don't deserve to have the opportunity to live with God forever, and to experience the love of God here on earth as well. So what we deserve is death. We deserve death. We deserve hell. We deserve to suffer because we have basically turned away from God. Even though, so that's what we deserve because of our sin. When you think about what God has done for us in giving us this gift of grace, even though He's given us this great gift, we constantly we're tempted, we slip into sin, and that just goes to show that we are sinful. Even when we accept Christ, we will still continue to sin. But that just shows that any good work that we think we do, it's never going to be good enough to bridge the gap because our sin is always going to be there. But we've been reconciled because of Jesus, which is awesome. So, it's important to live in that truth and knowing that there's no thing bad enough we can do that will exclude us from God's grace, and there's no thing good enough we can do that will allow us to earn God's grace. And another important point, I think, is that again, just with the society we live in, everything's always about you. Your whole life, especially all of us at the moment, especially juniors or seniors, y'all are about to go off to college. We're gonna go to college so that we can make a good life for ourselves, so that we can get ourselves somewhere. I'm not saying college is a bad thing, because it's great to get an education, but our entire lives are based on us, and I think that's why some people do think that if you do enough good things, you can get into heaven. But it's not about us at all. It's about God, and it's about His grace. And His grace does not depend on us. That's another important thing. Like I said before, you cannot do something bad enough to be excluded from God's grace. You can't do something good enough to earn God's grace. God's grace is the same for everybody across the board. It's the basis for salvation for all, for the good, for the bad. It's the same for everyone. So, does anyone have any comments or anything? I feel like that was kind of brief, but if anyone wants to discuss anything.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we look and just to take it a little bit step further, I may not we kind of compare ourselves to other Christians, oh well, they sin more than I do, but the only thing we can compare ourselves is to the book right here, and I think if I look next to Jenny, I'm well, she said that bad thing about that girl yesterday. I wouldn't say that, I think oftentimes we get so caught up, comparing ourselves to everyone and all the Christians we know, when really we need to be comparing ourselves to the Bible and to Jesus, because that's who we're reaching for. We're not reaching for the person sitting next to us. We're reaching for Jesus. And so I think that also puts a halt on our judgment, because I think oftentimes Christians get so caught up in judgment and like, well, you know, that person's not going to go to Christian because, or going to go to heaven because, you know, they do this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, just you saying that, like, right there is judgment. And we're not called to judge. That's not our job. Our job is to love everyone. And so we need to compare ourselves to the Bible, not other Christians or other people, for that matter. And so I think that just taking a step further, we need to extend mercy to everyone else and not judge people for their sin, because God's not going to judge them for their sin. And so, well, he is, but like, you know what I mean. But like, I think that's so important because Jesus hung out with sinners, and Jesus hung out with, you know, his disciples, which were his friends. And so I think just to take it a step further, that like we need to extend mercy to other people, and those people we might not like, you know, they don't deserve it, but because we're a Christian, we need to show them the love and mercy of God. And so we may not like their actions. God never likes our actions, but he loves us constantly. And I think as Christians, that's what we need to do just to the world, because that way we'll have more people coming towards us and less people running away.
Yeah, I think it's very humbling when you try to live your life knowing that you're a Christian, but then also knowing that God's grace and God's love doesn't apply to you any more heavily than it does to a murderer. I think that's a very godly way to live your life, and obviously it's hard because, like Sammy already said, like our whole world every day, you're comparing yourself to other people, and that's why like this is such a hard. It was really hard for me to put this together and figure out how to say it because I was struggling with it at the same time. Our whole world is based off of comparison, and God doesn't compare us. God extends grace to us all the same. So yeah.
I think what's also really important is that, like, as you start to understand grace and understand that that is such a big characteristic of and describes who God is, it makes me like want to learn more about God and like have a stronger relationship with Him and like obey Him and like. Not that God isn't going to be pleased when you just obey, but like make Him happy by like, you know, telling people about Him and like sharing the hope that He's given me.
I think a good verse to remember is Matthew. It's like 7:1. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will also be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So if you're always judging, oh, they're doing this bad, they're doing this bad, I'm a better Christian than they are, then that's basically how God's still going to extend His grace upon you, but that's how you're going to kind of feel. God's going to show you how it feels to be judged in that way. And I mean, I don't want when the way that I judge people, I don't want God to judge me like that, because that would suck.
You're just like, oh, you're a better Christian. It's like Jesus, boom, perfect right here.
I don't know. I feel like grace is kind of like patience because it's a virtue. Not many people can understand it or really have it or give it because everyone wants to be so much better than each other. I mean, even friends like Brett, me and baseball, like we're friends. But I want to be better than him because like that's just the way society works today. No matter what you do, there's always a higher rank until you get to the highest rank, and everybody wants to be up there. They want to be better than everybody, and instead of, you know, being the person you are and just, you know, giving grace and showing love and not judging and stuff like that, you know? Yeah. All right, cool, thanks.
I think that I didn't really hit on this, but when you just think about, I kind of did touch on this, but how amazing it is that we turn away from God, and I know me, I'll have times when I just slip into sin, and I come back to God. I'll slip into sin and come back to God, and every time you come back, He never rejects you. Like, His grace, just like His love, is so steadfast in the fact that, like, we're, like, filthy, horrible, like, sinners who aren't perfect, who disobey, who are broken. The fact that He still decides to, like, extend grace to us, I think that's just incredible, and that should make us want to extend grace and mercy to other people as well.
I think extending it to ourselves is really important because oftentimes, like, you slip in that sin, you come back, and you're really hard on yourself. But, like, God still loves you, and He still accepts you. So, like, you need to, like, because he forgives and He forgets. And, like, I think in today's world, we forgive, but we never forget. And we always hold that against Him. And I think when we say, like, I forgive you, it should be, like, a true response of, like, I'm going to forget about this, and I'm never going to hold it against you again. Because God will never hold our sin against us once He's forgiven us. And so, so it's wiped away clean. And so I think, like, when we ask God for forgiveness, we need to learn to forgive ourselves and understand that that sin is wiped clean. We have a new slate, and we can start over. And the whole world might not think we have a whole new slate, but as long as we have one in God, that's all that matters. And so I think extending grace to yourself is a huge part of it.
I didn't think that's really good.
I would say there's a verse in a song that I really like is that God saved us from the sin but not the consequences. It's just like the ultimate consequence for sin is death, but that does not apply to us. Like if we believe in Jesus, that's taken away. But like when we do sin, like we feel the effects of it. We still feel the effects of it, and I think it's like a good way of like learning. It's just like not to do that again because we know how that can hurt others and know how it can hurt us. It's like God has saved us from this sin. He forgives it. He forgives and forgets about that, but we still suffer from the consequences in a sense. Not the ultimate consequence, obviously, but just in consequence.
The other day, I was talking about this in our church, but we were talking about like grace and mercy and everything. And she was saying that sometimes, like when we sin, we hold like that guilt of that sin above like accepting the fact that God will forgive us for those things, and like accepting His mercy and His grace. And I think that's sometimes hard because when you do something like so bad and you're like, oh, how could like He actually forgive me for this? If it's like, because like you are holding that guilt and like you're holding that kind of against yourself to actually like let Him like come into your life and like let Him be like, oh, it's okay, like I like forgive you for these things.
And I think, oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think we're all kind of in a point in our life right now where we're all really trying to be super independent, and it's just kind of like an age of we're all coming of age, trying to be adults in this, and so when we do sin and we do like take things upon ourselves that are kind of maybe negative, I think it's easy for us to fall into a pattern of just like blaming ourselves and putting it on ourselves all the time when really we really should be dependent on God because He is always there, and you really don't always have to fix everything yourself. So like you guys talking about all of this is kind of making, me realize that sometimes it is okay to just like put it onto Him and have Him kind of take care of it for you because we aren't strong enough to take everything on by ourselves. And so the fact that we do have that kind of support system of that kind of higher power is amazing, and we should totally take advantage of that whenever possible. And I think that the reason that we do put it on ourselves is Satan, because Satan knows that God has extended this amazing gift of grace to us. But Satan says, oh, if I can come in and make them think that if they mess up, like it's all their fault, like they won't think that they're worthy of God's grace. I think that is definitely Satan trying to distract us from the fact that we can put it all on God because He has extended this amazing gift of grace to us.
2 Corinthians 12:10 says, "For when I'm weak, then I'm strong." And I think like that's so humbling, understanding that you can't do it on your own. Like you're gonna sin. That's just who you are. Like, and just accepting that fact. And as he was saying like earlier, like you're always gonna want to be better than the next person. You're always gonna keep finding there's always a higher rank. Well, God and Jesus are the highest ranks you'll never accomplish it. And I think that's just so humbling, understanding you're always going to be fighting for it, because as Christians we just crave to be like Jesus. But just understanding that like we can't handle this on our own just because we're so weak, because we are human. It makes you strong by doing that. And so when you're weak, you're strong.
There was this song I heard at Young Life Camp a couple years ago, and it goes, "Amazing love, how can it be that you, my God, would die for me? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, I come and lay my burdens down." And that's pretty much just saying like how amazing God is, that we come in sin, but yet again He comes and takes our burdens and it just says, you take these burdens and just trust in me, because I love you. It's just so, that's grace.
And like my idea, when I was, like I said, trying to think of what to talk about, I have like before I go to bed, I listen to like Pandora with like Christian music, and like songs kept coming on, and I kept like the word grace just kept coming out of me. And there's so many songs that just talk about amazing grace, and that's truly what it is. Like what you just said, like it truly is amazing that God would send His Son to die a sinner's death on a cross and like endure our punishment that we deserve, and just give us His Son that we're so completely undeserving of. It's just completely incredible, and that's why I think we have so many songs that use the phrase "Amazing Grace" because it really is amazing.
Yeah, it always blows my mind, just like when I slip into sin, and then going to God and just asking Him to forgive me. It's really, it just blows my mind the fact that He can forgive me, but I have a hard time forgiving myself. Like I wouldn't forgive myself for some of these things, but He still does, and it just blows my mind. Like every time it happens, it's just really amazing.
We have 30 people, so we can do 3 groups of 10. Are we mixing?